We knew them. The humans were part of the United Planetary Coalition for hundreds of years by the time we were confronted by the Brosk. Humans were scavengers, hagglers, pirates, and all around an affront to intergalactic sapience. Even their official diplomats, military bodies, and leading minds were little better than the apes they had evolved from. They were the only race known whose people would go to war amongst themselves. And when UPC peacekeepers stepped in to dispel the fighting, some human faction would always complain and counsel of the UPC picking sides. Even when all anyone did was disarm both sides and introduce neutral arbiters to aid negotiations. Their ships were garbage. Their medical knowledge was rudimentary. Their physical prowess was lacking, they being hairless apes with little more than an impressive bite force to show for any natural weaponry. Their societies were bickering, inefficient messes of poorly placed priorities and wildly abused appropriations of funding. Their languages, yes, more than one, were improvised messes, seemingly designed with the express purpose of terminating translation AIs. In short, the humans were a nuisance most members of the UPC felt had gotten into the coalition by riding the coattails of their barely qualifying civilization status, as well as their admittedly impressive feat of attaining FTL alone, prior to first contact. We knew them, and we thought very lowly of them. So when the Brosk showed up and sterilized 3 UPC worlds, one of which was the only inhabited world of one fledgling member race, and the call for military conscription was sent out, seeking a first string of voluntary participants, we were surprised when the first 3 responses were from humans. When the rare conscription call went out among the UPC, you expected a response from member governments. And each member would provide its standing army and give civilians the opportunity to enlist for service. But that's not what the humans did, or not exclusively anyway. It was not human worlds or leaders who replied so swiftly. Those first responses came from 2 pirate ships and a scrap station. A damned stationary scrap station volunteered to the UPC Council for service. Of the 56 responses that came in the first day, fully 47 of them were from human crews, stations, outposts, and 1 from the actual human leadership. It was an embarrassing show of ineptitude, and reinforced in many member races' minds that humans were good for little more than spur-of-the-moment, chest-thumping acts of enthusiastic violence. The number of their replies should not have filled us with hope for their turnout. Nevertheless, expecting nothing, we were still disappointed with the number of ships that were mustered. 193 ships turned up, 75 of which were official military. Even the Grell, a monoplanetary species who were generally regarded basically as pacifists, managed to bring 360 proper ships to bear. It was such a lackluster showing, UPC Command didn't bother to incorporate them into any of the main squadrons. Humanity was offered a role we thought they would like better anyway: bounty hunters and privateers. Take down Brosk ships, turn in the bounty for pay. We were surprised at their almost childish response. Human Command sulked but didn't argue. What followed for humanity was truly embarrassing. UPC repair docks and medbays reported constant visits from human ships, sometimes having to issue repairs on the same ship just days apart. The damage was always disastrous and obviously one-sided. No one ever wanted to point out the most shameful evidence in the repairs. The bulk of hull damage seemed to be on the tails of their ships. They were incompetent, yes, but more than that, they were cowards. Contrary to this, however, was the human disregard for personal well-being. Humans brought in for medical attention would ignore the advice of medical professionals and would be hobbling back onto their ships on crutches or with heavy bandages or splints, still wrapping the injury in mere days or weeks after treatment. It was a joke at repair and med bays that the three things you could count on finding in a UPC port was food, quarter, and a human wreck. The war lasted 2 years. Paltry. The Brosk turned out to be inferior opponents, never able to hold strategic positions for long, and never able to reclaim them when lost. The average duration of UPC wars was 30 years, thanks to the challenge of holding and fortifying a battlefront that spanned interstellar distances. These sorts of things tended to spend some time in deadlocked stalemates until some carefully calculated play finally broke the line somewhere. Usually, you expected some major losses planet-side along the front. But there were no civilian casualties here, apart from the instigating destruction of the 3 UPC worlds. Of course, the Brosk hadn't gone down without a fight. In fact, they managed to average 3 UPC ship destructions for every one of their own. Nevertheless, their planetary defense systems, ship construction, and distribution of firepower across the front were weak and amateur. The human force had lost 50% of their ships and suffered heavy casualties in the end. In addition, they never managed to turn in a single bounty. If not for the loss of lives, they would have been reprimanded and possibly taxed to recoup the drain on repair and medical resources they had caused so fruitlessly. The Brosk and its allies signed their surrender grudgingly. A human diplomat was in attendance per council protocol. As the Brosk was escorted away, he passed the human and spat at her feet. We thought it was a random act of bad sportsmanship. The human smirked at the passing Brosk. This too was viewed as in poor taste. It took another year to disarm the Brosk and collect reparations. In the years following, we pored over confiscated Brosk intel. Deciphering so much encrypted data from so many battlefields was a process. The coded radio and audio transmissions were the first data we could reliably listen to. We were surprised to find constant reference in Brosk communications to the bloodletter. It appeared in Brosk communications from every major battle, every minor skirmish, and in relation to acts of sabotage and espionage throughout the war. By Brosk accounts, this bloodletter was a boogeyman. It showed up so often, it was taken as Brosk code for any UPC force, which was to be considered a top threat. Word of the bloodletter spread through the UPC military ranks, despite the information's confidential nature. Any leaked bloodletter feed was shared around, and hundreds of soldiers proudly laid claim to each one. The bloodletter crippled the Brosk defensive platforms at Ericor 9. It could only have been our Gorlo squadron. We rained plasma down on them at the third battle, and finally punched through. Could be heard at one attract base. While light years away, an Onolin soldier boasted, "Sounds like we were bloodletters to those Brosk filth. Did you hear about how we took out their defensive platforms at Ericor 9? And so it went." By the time we cracked Brosk video comms, it seemed half of the UPC was crewed by bloodletters. It was painted on hulls by proud and rowdy soldiers. It was a title given to retiring heroes, and it was the assumed name of not a few newly founded special forces teams. Author's name and the link to original text is in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video.